Welcome to another episode of Let's Be Perfectly Queer. On tonight's show, we've got some amazing guests talking about an initiative that launches from February 1st to February 14th every year. We've got the founder and the originator, I guess, of this initiative. Jessica Whitebread is here to share her story, and my buddy Brittany Cameron, who I am very happy to see. It's been far too long since I've seen that face. Welcome, ladies, to the show. I really appreciate you both being here today.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks.
So the initiative that I alluded to is called Love Positive Women. And let's start with you, Jessica, since this is sort of your baby. And I think both Brittany and I can relate to having initiatives and programs that we've launched and feel very passionate about. Tell us about Love Positive Women and what it's all about, why it began.
Yeah, so Love Positive Women is a global initiative. Some call it a holiday, some call it a campaign. However it speaks to you, that's fine. That started in 2013. It started as an idea to how to think about like how women living with HIV should be celebrated within our community, especially in a Canadian context. The focus generally isn't on women living with HIV. A lot of programs are housed within organizations that don't have women-specific programming around HIV. So it's like, how can we celebrate the women living with HIV within our communities? And how, as women living with HIV, can we celebrate ourselves? So while I'm talking a little bit of more Canadian context, this project actually spans in about 45 different countries have participated, about 100 different, or actually I think last year it was 125 different projects around the world, which is really cool. And most of them are grassroots projects. So they're actually led by women living with HIV. For instance, in Nepal last year, there was an initiative where they knit scarves and gave 10-kilo bags of rice to elder women living with HIV, which is really sweet and amazing. There was a talk show in India where they remade someone's house, and it just like they're so powerful. So it's been really, really exciting to watch it grow. Really, I just planted a seed, and I'm here to just nurture everyone's individual projects that really make up this collective movement of Love Positive Women.
That's wonderful. And I'm trying to remember my research here. I think you began working on it in 2013, and then the first actual project launch was 2014. So we're looking at 7 years now.
2012 and then 2013. Yeah. So it's getting close to the decade, like 10 years. This is the 8th year from counting.
That's fantastic. That's great. And you did this in partnership with another organization, or was this just like, how did this come to be?
So basically, I'm an artist, activist, woman living with HIV myself. And I was just I'm really interested. My arts practice is about these long-term projects and social change work. So I actually started it. I was wondering how people start like international, like World AIDS Day or International Breastfeeding Week. And I was just like, I think you just like declare it's a holiday and you kind of fake it till you make it. So you just say, and then you do, and you tell everyone that it's the thing to do, and then they hopefully follow. And it was actually the women in Jamaica who started referring to it probably in about 2015 as a holiday. So I was like, yeah, it's a holiday. So that's why I say it can just be whatever you want. So now for many women living with HIV, it's a holiday.
Yeah, and what better reason to celebrate? I did a little post myself around Love Positive Women this year, and it just a few of the Canadian women that I've had the opportunity to work with. Brittany wasn't part of the campaign that I've been doing, so I wasn't able to include her photo, but she's certainly one of those individuals who has not only helped mentor me in the work and the activism that I do. Brittany was really there when for me, that activism was born. and being able to speak with you, Britt, about the things that you were doing, not only around HIV in respect to women living with HIV, but all of us living with HIV, certainly inspired me. And I want to hear a little bit about your story, Brittany, and why you felt it was important to really get involved and promote Love Positive Women this year, especially in your role as co-chair with the Canadian Positive Peoples Network.
Yeah, thanks so much. Making me tear up, watching you grow into your activism. So for me, it actually starts with my HIV diagnosis. I was diagnosed at 36 weeks pregnant in March of 2006. And I was diagnosed at a time where women were not necessarily open in my community. We were, for the most part, isolated and not connected, not well connected. And so that's kind of where I started, is trying to build connections, whether it was social media, getting into Toronto to some of those women's groups and stuff. But that's kind of where it started for me, for my own feeling of not feeling connected, and knowing, globally, women represent more than 50% of those who live with HIV, but here in the community, we didn't have a face. And so that really propelled me not just to get involved in HIV work, but more specifically women's work, because I really wanted to see myself represented in that work and see other mothers and women along the spectrum represented in that work. And so, yeah, I think I learned about the campaign in maybe 2014, I'm thinking. Amazing campaign. I remember receiving my first card from Jessica and the team in Visual AIDS New York, and just feeling like not alone, loved, validated, no longer isolated, deep sense of connection. And so here in my local community, I worked with my local ASO to really bring that here. And each year we've planned, small grassroots initiatives. We've, one year we did a cannabis collective where we learned about medical cannabis and the uses of that. There was a goat farm trip.
I remember that one. It was so great.
Yeah,
I loved it. It was my favorite.
This year is really special for me. So it's been about 5 years since my local organization has been doing Love Positive Women. We recently hired a new phenomenal woman, Sabrina Coopers, shout out to her, with our Women in HIV/AIDS Initiative program. And so I kind of gave that to her because it's been really me here at my local agency driving Love Positive Women every year. And this year, Sabrina is full of capacity and really excited to do the work. So I was able to kind of be like, here, this is something that you can continue leading in our community, which actually allowed me to put more time and energy to, as you noted, I'm the co-chair of the Canadian Positive Peoples Network. And one thing I've never seen is visibility for women across our nation. And so it was really my honor to be able to see not only my baby grow in the Peterborough context, but actually be able to then allow that project to flourish naturally and grow naturally, but then be able to exhaust my energies kind of in a different way. So yeah, February 1st of this year, CPPN launched our first ever Love Positive Women's campaign. It is a national campaign. It's just been beautiful. The responses that we've gotten, the women that have shared their stories. There's been at least 2 women in community that are speaking in a public national forum and sharing their testimonies for the very first time. And it's just so brave, right? And so beautiful. And for me, that's what it's all about. It's about connection and empowerment and knowing we're not alone, that we actually do make up in the global context. We're half here for that, right? So how can we be acknowledged and accurately represented and build an awareness, because we're still here.
Yeah, and I think that's incredibly important. I think that's how we battle the stigma that's associated with HIV as well, by showing all the varieties of faces, genders, races that this illness affects, and it affects everyone. No one is immune from an HIV infection. It really is a universal issue that we all need to recognize. And certainly women, as you said, and I agree completely, have been sort of put to the wayside, because for so long and for too long, HIV and AIDS has been thought of as the gay man's illness, the gay man's disease. And we know that's not the case. As you said, more than 50% of folks living with HIV across this globe are women. And I don't have the percentages in front of me, but a large number of folks in sub-Saharan Africa, for example, is women and children living with HIV. And those are always, in a lot of these campaigns and projects that we talk about around HIV, that seems to get missed. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, the stats right here in Canada, it's roughly 25% of those living with HIV are women, if I'm not mistaken. So when a quarter of the folks affected aren't brought to the table and given an opportunity to speak, Jessica, hats off to you. You create your own table and build the chairs and bring people to sit in them. And that's what I see this initiative and this project as having done. And so speak a little bit about that and how this project helps to really shine light on what HIV really is across this globe. Yeah, so I think that the women's movement has really, and through Love Positive Women, has been very strong. As I said, it's mostly grassroots projects, and that's the way I really feel that women across this globe living with HIV organize and mobilize. Globally, women's organizations, women-led organizations are deeply underfunded. For example, with the last US administration, they had the global gag order. So many organizations that do sexual and reproductive rights work were completely defunded, especially if they talked about reproductive rights in relation to abortion, which many of our organizations do. So being underfunded to actually be present, it's a male-led world. And so when you're saying bring your own seat to the table, I think that Love Positive Women also creates a platform for women to get together and to actually talk about, hell yeah, there's a whole lot of us. And if you're not going to do it, we're going to do it for each other. So every year it's been really, really incredible, the almost snowball effect of the project or the holiday campaign, whatever, and how women are kind of carving out this space. And I just want to mention, I absolutely love this year how in Ontario specifically, Y has been, the Women in HIV initiative has been pairing it with Black History Month and really talking about in Ontario, especially like North American, global context, how actually HIV women and Blackness need to be talked about in this intersectional approach. And that, like, their work this year has been so powerful. So I really want to suggest people look on social media and just follow hashtag Love Positive Women, and you'll see it. It's stunning visually, but also sparks an incredible conversation, which is so important. Yeah, I've certainly been following and have seen some of those stories and watched some of the videos that CPPN has put out. Again, speaking of women living with HIV that have been a part of my life, that have helped me in various initiatives and helped me to grow and learn, and women that I love. I speak of Deborah Norris, I speak of Kelly Leader, Carla Martinez, all these amazing women that are bravely telling their stories about living with HIV, and they're all so very different stories. And I think that's really important. And I'm glad you touched on the intersectionality between women of color as well. And there was another post that I saw recently on the Love Positive Women page that was focused on trans women. And I think that's another piece of the puzzle that is often overlooked and missed. And so I think the fact that Love Positive Women isn't just love positive white women, it's love all positive women, and really get a focus on that variety of the demographic that HIV really does affect. And Brittany, maybe you can speak a little bit more with respect to that, because again, when we talk about women of color and trans women and sex workers and women who inject drugs, all these very specific folks that are at risk for being infected or affected by HIV are, again, often missed stories that we don't hear about. And it's hearing about those real life experiences that really make a difference.
Yeah, and I think for me, as a cisgendered white settler woman who does get often invited to the table, that part of my obligation of showing up for my sisters is ensuring accurate representation and appropriate representation. I'm constantly the person in the room that's like, what about our trans sisters? What about women who use drugs? What about sex working women? And just trying to continue to keep those folks on the agenda, reminding people that they are a part of our community. I remember a few years ago, Jessica, one of the graphics, I make graphics every year for the campaign, and one graphic that Jessica and I both actually really love was an affirmation that our community includes women who use drugs, right? And celebrating that in all of our diversities. The other thing I just want to reflect on with that, we've talked a lot about women. You spoke earlier, touched on children, Randy, and so I just want to go back to that for a minute, because I think it's also important to recognize that we're creating leaders. When I was diagnosed, I was 20 years old. There was very few women in Canada that were living openly with HIV. And it was those women that I was able to look for mentorship and leadership to empower and engage and enable myself to be where I'm at. So I think it's also important to recognize that by mobilizing women in the Love Positive women movement, we're actually able to enable others to act, especially young women who may not necessarily have found their voice or know where they fit into our diversity of who we are, right? So I want to give a shout out, I think, to the young women and girls who are living with HIV and saying, we see you, and you might be in a position right now that you're not able to come and speak about your experiences for whatever, all of those disclosure issues that challenge us, but we see you, we're here for you, and we're leading the way in some way to ensure that you do have an opportunity to be at this table and be future leaders in your communities.
Yeah, well said. Well said. I mean, and you're right. When we think about anyone in the HIV sector who is willing to share their personal experiences, there really is, again, a miss in the stats of youth exposure, and again, that I think all goes back to I hate using the word stigma all the time, but it really just, it really is what keeps us afraid to share these stories. And as Jessica so wisely pointed out, these grassroots movement that are led by folks living with HIV, for folks living with HIV, and that lived experience that we're able to share, that's incredibly powerful. So I know, Jessica, as part of this initiative, it's sort of broken down into different elements that folks can do, the card making, et cetera. Tell us about some of those aspects of the initiative, and maybe some of your favorites that you've been able to participate in over the years.
This is where I can talk forever, but okay, I'll try to. It's really, so the card making, I think the first one, or one of them that started, was actually in New York, a partnership with Visual AIDS, Dundee, Fire Island Artist Residency, a Positive Women USA, and a bunch of other organizations, where they actually started to make in handmade paper Valentines or cards. They call them Valentines, but I'm like, they love Positive Women cards. Anyway, and so they started off, I think the first year it was one workshop, and then where they made about 100 to send out to women around the world. Today, maybe not last year, but this year, whatever. But last year, it made over 1,000 cards in 2 days of workshops. So they had 6 workshops with women living with HIV, heads of, museums and galleries in New York City, accomplished, fancy artists, and they come together in one room to make these handmade cards and are sent to Zimbabwe, Ukraine, Argentina, Canada. It's really amazing. So lots of people took that, and all the projects actually kind of role model initiatives or give a best practice. So there's lots of card making in Puerto Rico, in Jamaica, in Nigeria. There was one in Ukraine, in Toronto, surrounding areas. That's been a very popular and project people replicate. Another one that was really beautiful was in Malaysia. people brought the children of women who were incarcerated to visit them as a surprise. That one made me cry. There was other initiatives. Recently, the International Community of Women Living with HIV this year had a dance party, and with a DJ Cosmic Cat, who's actually from Toronto, incredible. And there was people from 15 different countries just dancing in their homes and living rooms. That was a really fun moment. I know Brittany was dancing with me. It was great. It was so like, yeah, the list. Oh, one of my favorites, last one, was the Institute of Many, which was started by gay men in Australia. For a couple of years, they did an initiative for Love Positive Women where they asked their POS sisters out on dates. So, and then they posted photos after, and I was actually asked on one because I just happened to be in New York the same time as Nicholas, who was the founder, and he's like, let's go on a date. And I was like, yeah. So he took me for dinner and we smooched a bit, and it was absolutely delightful. And it was so fun to just watch this, you know, gay men learning about the experiences of women living with HIV. So there's been hundreds and hundreds of projects, but over the years, those are some that come to mind. Like, I am obsessed with, you know, this video project that CPPN has been doing. It's been really exciting to like see these videos, and some are people that, some are the usual suspects that I'm like, oh yeah, I know this woman, but other ones I'm like, oh wow, this is so interesting, like new voices. And Brittany, you are like spot on talking about like this creation of new leadership and mentorship through the movement.
Yeah, the videos have been amazing, and I love the idea of the Tim initiative. I think that's something, Brittany, you and I should maybe put that later and see if we can, you know, put our brains together and do something like that for next year.
Yeah, I'm
heard some of your favorites. Brittany, what about you from this year? What have been some of the favorites that you've seen with respect to the project, and more specifically, what you've been doing with CPPN?
I think, you know, CPPN is probably my favorite project this year, because when I first got involved with CPPN, it was really because we had this national agency by us for us, and we don't have a women's organization like that. And so I kind of seen that as an opportunity to potentially amplify women's voices. And so in some way we've reached that goal. We're not stopping here. This isn't the finish line, but it's taken a long time for us to be able to be in a position to launch a national campaign, to amplify women's voices, to make sure those stories are told. And so, yeah, I think, you know, it's just been a really beautiful opportunity to see that hard work come to fruition, right? Like, it's been over 15 years at this point that I've been living with HIV, and I've never ever seen a women's HIV campaign in our country. And this is kind of like a first one, if you will, in a different way. So there's that. I'm also really inspired. The beauty of Love Positive Women is you don't need a budget necessarily. You don't need to have connection to an agency necessarily. Like, you can dream and do. It's kind of like a what is possible question. Recently, when Jessica and I were kind of attending the Love Positive Women's video screening that we were doing, there was a woman who shared that she was so inspired by the work that was being done around Love Positive Woman and the campaign that she actually had fundraised with her own friends and family. She picked 10 women living with HIV in her community who often lead the work. And she was like, I've done my own initiative. I want to send you a gift for Love Positive Women. And so it's those pieces that really inspire me, because it enables, again, people to act, right? And this person also spoke about not being able to necessarily access the supports they needed in their community, but because we're kind of living in this virtual world now, we can collect globally. Women living with HIV can connect, you know, in a different way. And so I think that that's really inspiring for me. Yeah.
That was such a beautiful moment on that call. We were all crying. It was great.
Yeah, that's fantastic, and that's what this movement, I think, is all about. It's about sharing those individual stories And even if you just touch that one person that you inspire and give them courage and strength to realize that they're not alone and that it's okay to share their story as well. And then it builds on that. And I think that's where, I mean, obviously it's working because Love Positive Women has been around for 7-8 years now. And I don't see any sign of it slowing down anytime soon. And for it to have become a global initiative now, I think that's amazing. So I salute both of you for the courage that you have inspired in others, because I think that's so important. And I keep going back to the grassroots and lived experience. In my short tenure as an activist, and I use that term loosely because I'm not really sure how I would define myself in the work that I do, but that's what really impacts me when even just one person reaches out and says, you know, I saw your story, I listened to your show, I saw your campaign, you made a difference. That is when the tears start for me. So I'm getting cues from my producer that we are running out of time here. So I'm going to just throw it back to each of you one last time to give me final thoughts and any closing remarks that you might want to give to the audience around Love Positive Women. I'll start with you, Britt.
Yeah, I just want to thank you for this opportunity and thank you for your willingness to uplift this platform. And I think my other message is directly to women living with HIV, whether you live and celebrate in more of a closed way where you can't disclose, or if you're out there and proud and vibrant in many ways, we love you. We see you. You're not alone, and know that you're celebrated. You are loved.
Awesome. Jessica, final thoughts?
How do I top that, Brittany? That was so beautiful.
That wasn't fair to let Brittany go first, I realized.
No, but, you know, especially, yeah. So building on what Brittany said, you know, especially at this time, it's very difficult. And I think not more than ever, but just to engaging in Love Positive Women this year specifically, with women being very disconnected, with rates of violence increasing exponentially around the world. I think it's really important to just take a moment for yourself, if possible, to just tune in and to know that like people care about you. And if you do have the capacity as a friend, ally, lover, sibling, whatever, to show women living with HIV in your community that you care about them, maybe not individually, but by amplifying the movement, you know, that is really helpful, and it's going to be really impactful, as we've already seen. So thank you so much for having the show. And Brittany, I think you're absolutely divine, and, you know, yeah, anyway, thank you for all the work you do, because I've been living for almost 20 years in a Canadian context, and it's 100% true. The visibility on a national level, especially for women and women's like messaging, non-existent. And kudos to you for finally bringing that.
Thank you, Jessica. It was really you who enabled me to act. So I appreciate your leadership and mentorship.
Thank you both again for joining me on this episode. I really appreciate it. We will do this again, if not next year, then maybe even sooner, and just talk about women living with HIV in a more broader context. But thank all of you for watching tonight. I hope you'll tune in again next week for another edition of Let's Be Perfectly Queer. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Randy.
Thank you.